Right now, there's a popular opinion floating around the internet among movie reviewers that the superhero genre is dying. According to these people, the public is just getting tired of the genre as a whole, and that's leading to the lower box office numbers coming out of the most recent batch of superhero movies. I've seen a lot of articles referring to this phenomenon as superhero fatigue. There's no denying that superhero movies seem to be more and more prone to flopping. Within just this last year, we had Black Adam, Quantumania, Shazam 2, The Flash, and most recently, Blue Beetle. In fact, let's start there. What struck me while watching Blue Beetle was how absolutely predictable it was. This was seriously the most bland, by-the-book superhero movie I've seen all year. Absolutely no component of this movie stands out. And it turns out when you make a completely forgettable movie that offers nothing new, that people have seen 1,000 times before, it doesn't drive a whole lot of turnout. So this movie is bombing pretty hard. But what if I told you you could make a movie about a Latino superhero finding his place in the world and struggling with the importance of his family, and it would actually be good, and it would actually make a ton of money? Yeah, you can. It's this movie. Both stories about young Latino superheroes, and both came out within 3 months of each other, in 2023, supposedly in the age of superhero fatigue, and yet this one made 7 times its production budget, and this one might not even get its budget back. So what's the difference? Well, I'd argue that these aren't even the same type of movie. You see, I think superhero movies can basically be broken into 2 types. A Type 1 superhero movie is one with a rigidly formulaic plot. The villains have no meaningful motivation. The hero pretty much doesn't change throughout the entire movie. There's usually a big CGI battle at the end. You pretty much know what's going to happen about an hour before the movie decides to reveal it. They're unsurprising, extremely safe, unoriginal. A Type 2 superhero movie has to deviate from that generic superhero formula in some significant way. It shows you something you haven't seen before, and there are a lot of ways to make a Type 2. Maybe it cleverly incorporates elements of another genre. Maybe its plot elements actually feel consequential to the characters. Maybe its visual style is extremely unique or interesting. Essentially, a Type 2 superhero movie will feel like the creator's mission was just to make a good movie, and they happen to do it in the superhero genre. I don't love this definition because it's a little vague, but I don't know that I can give you a blanket description that encompasses all Type 2s. That's kind of the point. They defy a formula. The divide between Type 1 and Type 2 isn't sharp. It's not binary. I think there are movies that sit right on the boundary between Type 1 and Type 2. Like I said, I'm not 100% satisfied with the definitions I've laid out here, but even though I can't precisely define Type 1 and Type 2, I know them when I see them. The bottom line is when I say Type 1, I want you to think generic, and when I say Type 2, I want you to think innovative. By the way, that's not to say that Type 1 and Type 2 are synonymous with bad and good. There are good Type 1 superhero movies. A lot of the movies from the Infinity Saga are good Type 1s. And there are bad Type 2s. I think Multiverse of Madness is an extremely creative and original movie with a really unique directorial style, but its plot and character elements hold it back from being good. So that, in essence, is my hypothesis. Type 1s, being stagnant and predictable, are going to continue flopping at the box office, where Type 2s, while much more rare, are going to generate big box office returns and continue to be some of the best movies of their respective years. So now let's revisit those movies that bombed this year. The same critique level that pretty much all of them is that they're unoriginal, they're formulaic. They're definitely Type 1s, so it kind of makes sense that these movies are bombing. Hypothesis confirmed. But there seems to be kind of a glaring problem with my theory, right? In the past, superhero movies, even the pretty generic ones, have been extremely profitable. So why did the Type 1 superhero movies of the past actually perform well at the box office, when right now, Type 1s seem like box office poison? Take a look at Ant-Man. Ant-Man is a fine movie, but it is not very memorable on its own. It's got an unsympathetic villain, its plot is about as predictable as possible. It's a charming, funny movie, but this is about as Type 1 as Type 1s get. But then in the middle of this movie, you're watching along, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, there's Falcon from that other movie. Now, despite being pretty lightweight and inconsequential, this movie has tied itself to something bigger, and innately become more memorable. And those ties only become more memorable and more interesting later when Ant-Man gets recruited by Falcon and shows up in Civil War. That's the magic of shared universe storytelling. And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. There's something very satisfying about watching all these separate characters bounce off each other and change the trajectory of each other's stories. It's the same reason The White Lotus is so fascinating. And actually, the comparison to TV is more accurate than it might seem. Think of Type 1 superhero movies as episodes of TV. Even in the best TV series, there are episodes that are more impactful to the overall story, and episodes that are less impactful. But in well-written shows, the impactful episodes are built out of the character developments that happen in those less impactful ones. Think Breaking Bad's Ozymandias or The Wire's Middle Ground. Those are probably the 2 best episodes of TV I've ever seen, and they rest on so many moments from the seasons that preceded them, so that when they do drop some huge character-altering moment, it feels extremely satisfying. It feels earned. Walt walks up to Jesse as he's being dragged away and says,
"I watched Jane die."
And it's like, oh, that's been bubbling up for 3 seasons. Omar and Brother Muzone corner and kill Stringer, which has been brewing since he set them against each other a full season earlier. These are the moments that make good TV shows memorable, but they're built from less memorable episodes. You can't have Ozymandias without Fly. There is no middle ground without the pager. And similarly, when it's paid off with Civil War, Infinity War, and Endgame, Age of Ultron becomes a lot more enjoyable. Ant-Man 2 feels more important because it ends by throwing the protagonist into the ongoing drama of Infinity War. Ties to an overarching story drive people to see less memorable installments of that story because they don't want to miss the setups for the payoffs that will happen in the big important installments. And I think that's the reason why these recent Type 1s are underperforming so heavily. Right now, it's really only DC and Marvel battling it out in the superhero genre. And both of these studios have, for different reasons, kind of abandoned any overarching narrative connecting their movies. Let's rewind for a second. Back in July of 2017, right before the release of Justice League, DC decided to embrace a new direction for their movies. Diane Nelson, the president of DC Entertainment, stated that DC wanted to de-emphasize the idea that their movies were sharing a universe. Going forward, there would be, quote, no insistence upon an overall storyline or interconnectivity in that universe. At the time, this made the tiniest bit of sense. DC's shared universe was floundering in the wake of Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, and Suicide Squad, and out of nowhere, Wonder Woman becomes this massive critical and commercial success. Nelson and the other DC execs took note of the fact that Wonder Woman didn't rely on its shared universe aspects nearly as heavily as the other DCEU movies, and somehow that became the lesson they took away from Wonder Woman. They were just like, I guess less shared universe good, more shared universe bad? I think by learning that lesson in the summer of 2017, they may have irreparably screwed themselves, and the impact of that choice is being felt even 6 years later, because after Wonder Woman, aside from these 2 surprising successes, it's just been bomb, 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 currently bombing. And it's hard for me to see a reason these movies are all bombing aside from the fact that they aren't connected to a larger overarching story. You can say that these movies feature lesser known characters, so their box office potential is lower, but you want to know who else had been putting out movies with relatively unknown characters? Marvel. Want to know how you turn the Guardians of the Galaxy, Ant-Man, Doctor Strange, and Captain Marvel into box office gold? You make them part of a story people are already interested in. You can make a pretty formulaic by-the-book superhero movie, and it'll still sell tickets because it's connected to a story that isn't formulaic or boring. But take away that connection, and what you're left with is just a bland, predictable movie. So nobody gives a fuck about, like, Shazam 2, because it relies so heavily on the rigid formula for Type 1 superhero movies, and it doesn't even compensate for its boringness by setting up a meaningful long-term story arc. If your thing is making boring, formulaic movies, disconnecting them from their shared universe is a great way to get people to stop watching them. What's weird is that Marvel, who basically wrote the book on how to do this correctly, has also been fumbling it in the last few years. Take a look at the narrative structure of the Infinity Saga. Phase 1, you get all these solo movies and then the characters meet up for the Avengers. Then with Phase 2, it picks up the story of those same characters from the Phase 1 solo movies and throws in a couple of new players for good measure, and then they team up again for Ultron. Now in Phase 3, you get to do the cool shit. Those same Phase 1 solo movie characters get new appearances that push their story arcs even further, and then we also get some more side characters, and then at the point of the big team-up, it's this huge mega team-up with all the characters we've seen to that point, but with a particular focus on ending the stories for those very same Phase 1 solo movie characters. There's this expansion and contraction of the story being told. It starts in this more concentrated node of main characters, expands a little bit to draw in some side characters, and then recontracts every so often to bring the characters together for group development, and then it expands a little bit more before contracting again. But the connecting thread throughout the whole process is those main characters. Now look at the structure for Phases 4 and 5. With one exception, every story in Phase 4 is totally disconnected from the others, and the story never contracts to bring those characters back together. And then somehow, Phase 5 does the exact same thing. There are, by my estimate, about 12 different stories being told in the Multiverse Saga so far, and there is no indication these stories are going to intersect at any point in Phase 5, which for the most part seems like it's just going to keep starting new stories instead of continuing older ones. The story is just continually expanding, with no indication as to who the important players are. And without main characters for the audience to focus on, there can't be any satisfying character arcs, which is one of the major draws of long-form storytelling like this. It's hard to see how the creative higher-ups at Marvel didn't anticipate this problem, but after Endgame, I kinda think a whole new level of greed set in. I'm not operating under any delusions that in the Infinity Saga, Marvel was just making movies for the artistic value of it all, without any regard for money. Obviously, money was the goal this entire time. But after Endgame, I think there was a drastic change in the attitude of Disney towards these characters, and I think it coincided with the launch of Disney+. Before, it was like they were introducing characters that would have some role in the larger narrative they were building. They seemed at least somewhat selective about which characters fit into their story and which didn't. Post-Endgame, it's like Disney sent an intern down to the Marvel Comics vault and told him to bring back a list of any character that hadn't been commercially exploited enough. Echo? I have no idea who that is. Let's greenlight an entire TV series about her. Agatha Harkness, a completely forgettable villain from one of our other TV shows? Yeah, let's do a 9-episode dark comedy about her. Then the intern was like, hey, while I was down there, I found this group called the Thunderbolts. It's basically like the same shit as Suicide Squad. And they were like, holy fuck, you're telling me we can just make a movie where we just reuse side characters from our other movies? Yes, green light, let's do it. Never mind the fact that this absolute shotgun spread of characters is so numerous, you could never meaningfully use all of them in any competently written story. The bottom line is, if they own some piece of IP, they'll make an entire fucking TV show about it. But why is it so bad that they made all these TV shows? I mean, doesn't that just provide more content for the people who want to watch it? Well, yeah, but at the cost of completely undermining a huge component of a shared universe. Important shared events. Remember how right after the Avengers, the next Iron Man movie focused on the psychological aftermath of the Battle of New York for Tony Stark? Remember how Civil War built on the destruction left by the previous two Avengers movies, as well as Winter Soldier, to show a world ready to constrain the Avengers? Great examples of a world growing with the characters who inhabit it. Actions in the Infinity Saga weren't limited in their effects to just the people in the movie in which they occurred. The characters were sharing a world, and that world kept changing to fit what was happening in the story. Now, think back, if you can, to Eternals. You definitely don't remember that movie, so let me recap. A giant dude was living inside the Earth, and he started busting through the Earth's crust to the point that this is what it looked like. And somehow in the 12 stories that supposedly take place after that, nobody talks about it. Like, I think giant man found living inside the Earth might make, like, the CNN News chyron, you know? No matter what crazy bullshit is happening in any of the Phase 4 and 5 stories, it goes pretty much unheard of by any other character sharing that world. And this is pretty much a direct result of the absolute explosion of Marvel TV shows. The Infinity Saga story was centralized around one medium, giving an underlying structure to the whole thing. Now that the story is being split between movies and TV, they've lost that natural feeling of progression. This is partly due to the fact that it seems like nobody, not even the higher-ups at Marvel, knows what order things are going to be released in. You can't put game-changing events in any one TV show if you can't be sure what shows are going to be released before and after it. And since the movie release schedule is basically independent of the TV release schedule, none of the movies can rely too heavily on the TV shows either. Splitting the medium of your story like that is a really bad decision because it limits how much your world can change. So we're left with no main characters and no major events for the 1 billion new characters to share. Congratulations, when you combine those two things, it means that you accidentally dissolved your own shared universe. You're now in the same boat as DC, churning out these predictable, weightless Type 1s with no connecting thread, be it characters or events, to hold your movies together. And that's the difference between Type 1s and Type 2s. Type 2s don't need that overarching story to be successful because their quality just stands alone. One movie after completely reinventing the superhero genre, The Dark Knight does a 180 and delivers a complex crime drama wearing the skin of a superhero movie. Logan is a powerful, emotional, violent send-off to a character that doesn't even need the previous X-Men movies to stab you directly in the heart. The Batman built the first Gotham City that actually looks and feels like a place corrupt and scary enough to need a Batman to save it. Spider-Verse took the idea of a comic book movie literally, pioneering an entirely new visual style and grounding it in a story about a kid growing up and finding his place in the world. And how did audiences respond? They love these movies. The box office numbers don't lie. And by the way, not every franchise movie is destined for box office failure. No Way Home. This movie made a buttload of money because it found a clever and creative way to incorporate alternate versions of Spider-Man into a story that actually benefited from their presence instead of feeling like a lazy nostalgia grab. No Way Home walked so the Flash could trip over its own shoelaces and fall off a cliff. What's really weird to me is that it feels like a lot of people talking about superhero fatigue seem almost happy about it, like they want the genre to fail. And that's definitely not me. I firmly believe there are still great stories left to tell in the superhero movie genre. And the good news for viewers like me, and for creators who have visionary ideas for the genre, is that I don't think superhero fatigue is real. Audiences still like superhero movies. They'll still pay to see them. They just have to be good. The superhero genre isn't dying, it's just changing. Going forward, without the shield of a cinematic universe to protect these mediocre superhero movies, it's going to be a lot easier for viewers to tell which ones are half-hearted cash grabs and which ones are something else entirely. Legitimately beautiful works of art. Thanks for watching.